meeting over to our second speaker, which is Kathy from Northampton.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks, Paul. That was fantastic. I just want to say, Paul said it all, really, so we can all go home now. I've been stressing about this all morning, and yet, as soon as I came and sat in here, apart from looking round and thinking, my God, it's even more scary at this end, just hearing the readings and hearing a share made me realise all this is a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous, and that's what's kept me clean for the time I've been clean. I would like to thank the committee and Anne-Marie and how she got this trust of judgment in asking me to share after hearing me talk for about 2 minutes. I really don't know, so I just hope I do it. Because there's that part of me that goes, I've got absolutely nothing to say. I'm so less than everybody else. I haven't had great traumas. I haven't had this. And yet there's that other side that goes, if you say the wrong thing, every single person in the room is going to rush out and relapse, you know. And that's sort of why I'm so grateful that our first step talks about being powerless over addiction. Because if I'm powerless over my addiction, I sure as hell haven't got any power over yours. And that's a real gift, actually. Okay, more will be revealed. Quite a lot has been revealed to me about me during my time in recovery. A lot of it in the latter years, very much like you were saying, was my disease being revealed. I think between sort of 10 and 12 was the worst time, and it was all down to my head. I think the first thing that got revealed was the fact that I actually wanted to stop using drugs. I'd never really heard of NA. I didn't do treatment or anything. When I was first using, at the end of the 70s in Birmingham, I had this probation officer who wanted me to go into treatment, and all I sort of told him was, I've seen what they do to the monkeys, you ain't doing that to me. And that was the way I was. What my disease has always done with me, though, is isolate me. I heard someone sharing this morning about thinking they were adopted. I used to fantasise that I was adopted because I didn't want to be from the family I came from. Not that there was anything wrong with them. They were a very loving, caring family. But I isolated myself from that, and I didn't want to be a part of it. And I think that my first addiction was reading. I'd read anything just to escape who I was. And normally I'd become that character in that book. And it was usually some sort of tragic heroine, which meant I could become a victim very easily, because that's how I sort of felt. But yeah, the first thing that was revealed to me was, and it took a while, was that I actually wanted to stop using drugs. I did a few country moves after I started using, and I lived abroad, and I used to come back, and I can really see why it's so special what we've got in here, that connection of another addict, because I'd be living away. I was teaching English in a foreign country. This was after I discovered I could buy Valium over the counter in all sorts of countries in Europe, and got totally wasted. But I'd be sort of clean, as far as I knew clean, for about 9 months of a year. And I'd come back here and I would just feel so isolated, because while I was out there, I was mixing with people who'd been at university and this, that and the other, and my head would be screaming, don't you know where I've come from? You don't understand me. And so I'd go back to places that I use with, because the only people I could connect with were other addicts, and I certainly didn't know any clean addicts then. Thank God today I do, because I can get that connection. But I came back to the UK in the late 80s, moved town, which was great. It was a town that nobody had known me in, so I could build up this false persona of who I was. And things sort of carried on fairly sweetly for a little while. And then all of a sudden at 38, I found I was right back there where I'd been in my late 20s. And there was that, how's it come to this? But it was still nothing to do with the drugs. As far as I was concerned, it was every single person that I knew. It was all their fault. And if they'd just leave me alone so I could use drugs successfully, then I'd be all right. And then a miracle happened, really. Somebody came round to the house who I used to buy drugs from. I actually owed this person some money. And I opened the door with all those social niceties we got, and I went, I ain't got your money because I'm trying to stop, so you'll have to go away. You know, I was waiting for somebody to come round. And he said, do you want to stop? And I went, yeah, that's what I just said, innit? And he said, right, do you want to come to a meeting? And at that moment in time, I'd have said absolutely anything to get rid of this guy. So I went, yeah, whatever, just go away, thinking I'd not see him again. And there weren't many meetings at all in the town I came from then. And he came round on the Wednesday and he took me to a meeting. And I was sitting here at the beginning of this share thinking I'll dry up in about 5 minutes. And if anyone had seen me at those early meetings, they would just be laughing at that thought, because all those feelings people talk about coming in with, being isolated, being lonely, being scared, I didn't even know that I had any of those feelings. I just sort of sat there and thought, what the hell is going on? And it took a good few months for it actually to be revealed to me that actually I do want to stop using. But I was in that place where I lived in a house with other users, I was married to a user, and I just didn't know how. And that was a desperately lonely place to be. Going home from a meeting and knowing that I would use was, I think, one of the most painful places I've ever been in. But something kept me coming to those meetings, and eventually, like I say, it was revealed I want to get clean. And I had to do a lot of things, funny, like you were just saying, Paul, about that people in the house. You know, I think my house was like dropping for anyone who'd been barred from the local night shelter. It was full of about 15 of them. I'd say things to people in meetings like, but how do I get rid of them? And they'd say, it's your house, Kath, tell them to fuck off. And I'm like, but how do I do that? And eventually they did, and the last one to leave was my husband. And thank God. And wow, that was, yeah, I thought I'd got, because there was a lot of like him crying outside the door, and I'll die on the streets and it'll all be your fault. And working through that, I really thought I got a grip on codependency. Later on in recovery, I found sponsees, and that brings up a whole new level of this. But yeah, he'd gone. And that was when I think I first found out that what people in these rooms wanted was just the best for me. Because I'd have a lot of his friends coming round, and it'd be like, but you're married to him, you're supposed to be looking after him, and blah, blah. And I walked into a meeting, and it was mad, this meeting. It was actually in somebody's front room, because we hadn't got a venue at the time. And I muttered something, oh, so-and-so won't be here tonight, and somebody turned around. It was all blokes in this room, and one of them turned around and said, oh, have you asked him to leave? And I'm like, yes, expecting all sorts of, you shouldn't have done that, and this, that and the other. And this bloke turned around and said, that really must have took some courage. And that was the first time, I think, that I realised people were on my side and all people wanted was me to get clean. And by that time, I desperately wanted to get clean. So anything that could be done, like you, anything that could be done, I'd be there doing it. Got involved at all sorts of service early on. I wouldn't necessarily recommend becoming a GSR at 30 days to be the best thing for your recovery. But ours was a very small area and people were very kind. But it gave me that feeling of, I want more than this. I want more of this. This is happening all over the place. One of the next things that I think was revealed to me was how scared of women I was. There were very, very few in my local fellowship. Well, there weren't. There was one, but then she went out. And somebody from another town suggested I came to a Women's Day in North London to meet some women. And I got there. Great, I'm going off to London. I'm going to meet women. I've got the train on my own. Isn't this going to be wonderful? And I got in there, and I think I'd sort of got there about halfway through this share, and I heard this woman talking, and it was, oh my God, I've got to get that honest. It was a whole new thing. I started to realise I couldn't manipulate people and things like that, and that was scary too, Sorry. Yeah, that was scary too. And I think all I'd done, before I was doing this, I was sitting there thinking, I've got nothing to share, my recovery ain't great, there's nothing really big about it. All I've really done is keep coming, and it's kept me clean for just over 16 years. And sometimes I don't know how. Then I went through the thing where, about 5 years clean after doing all this service and all this, that and the other. Got myself a job. The manager was very kind. She appreciated I was in recovery. Started to go to Region. That was fun. Actually, I really enjoyed it. And doors were opening, things were becoming marvellous. I'd got an amazing relationship with my sponsor. I was finding friends. I was on the phone to people all the time. And when I first started work with homeless people, I was working shifts, and so I used all those tools that I had. I'd phone people. I'd carry on with my step work. I would connect. I would get to meetings when I could. I would get to meetings out of town. I would just keep my connections going. And that was a wonderful time. That was an absolutely wonderful time in my recovery. And then it was quite funny, because one of the things my first sponsor had always said to me, the thing she always told me was that I'm responsible for my recovery. And during those first few years, that was it. I was teachable. If you told me to jump, I'd jump. I'd do anything that was suggested. And I kept coming and I kept turning up, and it worked. That's what I will say. This thing works. The steps were I wouldn't advise this to anyone. I didn't actually start working Step 1 until I was about 3 months clean. And so by the time I started working it was very, very long. And, you know, it was looking at my behaviours. It was actually longer than my first Step 4. And, you know, that was the stuff that kept me clean. Reading the literature kept me clean. So much faith in our literature. And yet, then life circumstances happened. My job changed. It became Monday to Friday. You know, during this good time, I could have weekends. I was still doing service. I was still getting away. I was getting to conventions. That's how I sort of, you know, I actually come to these things now. And somebody said to me earlier, "Oh my God, Kath, you know a lot of people." And actually I do now, you know, because I've been around and met a lot of people. But then one of the other things that was a major part of my recovery was the H&I committee. I used to be on UK H&I, and I met some fantastic people doing that service, and I met people that really, really stayed clean no matter what, you know, and that was sort of a main part of me. Then things changed, and my job went, and I had to be relocated into something else. I lost £4,000 a year. It was punishing shifts. I was having to take like annual leave to keep some of these commitments. I wasn't giving things my fullest. I was getting resentful about doing this stuff. I know I owe quite a few amends to people during that time. And my meeting attendance started to drop. And the talks I had with my sponsors started to drop. And the step work started to drop. And I started sponsoring myself. Which really, really is not a good idea, because there's at least 3 sponsors in here, and they all say something different, and none of it is good. You know what? Other behaviours had started coming out. You know, somebody was talking earlier about behaviours coming out, and I'd started online gambling, pure, you know, isolation. I'd heard something at a meeting last night about somebody. Isolation is when I'm doing something I don't want others to know about, and that's where I was. So, like I say, I'd cut off from people, cut off from talking to my sponsor, and was getting jealous and resentful about absolutely everybody, you know. My sponsor decided to go to Cambodia to fight for women's rights. And I'm going to actually be totally honest here, and I don't know if I've actually said this before. I'd been talking to her via, it had sort of got down to email and Facebook Messenger and this, that and the other for quite a while. And I knew she was going over to Cambodia a lot, and I knew that when I was talking to her, I wasn't being honest. I was just telling her things were fine. Okay, I've got to keep this short. Yes, it's okay, and I'm doing so and so. I actually learned she'd gone to live in Cambodia via Facebook. How sad is that? How disconnected was I? You know, and still the sponsor in my head was telling me that that's okay, because you've been around for like 11 years now and you're okay. And it's a bit, what happened was I didn't realise how far into that depths I got until I started to claw out of them. I sometimes sit here and I look back at it and I know I flippantly sort of said probably the only reason I didn't use was because I was too tired. But I don't think it was that. There was somewhere in there, there was that same desperation. about wanting to stay clean, but I was really scared of letting you people know how screwed up I was. I just didn't dare say, I've blown it, help me. So I was sitting on these resentments and, and then I think there was one of those little sponsors in my head was actually going, you're insane, you need to do something. And I ended up, it was one Christmas, and it was the first Christmas that I'd been back to my family house since the 80s. And, you know, I'd been there, but not exactly at Christmas. And I'd just made the decision then. It was like, right, I'm going to do that. I'm also going to go at the New Year's Eve thing, you know, because I've been to a couple of conventions during this time, and I was like still managing to isolate myself and keep myself away and just waving and, yeah, I'm fine at everybody. But I actually didn't isolate at this New Year's do, and I am so grateful. And I really don't want to embarrass anybody in here, but I'm just so grateful. I was sitting, talking to this woman about the fact that I felt really isolated. There was nothing happening in my fellowship. And she said, there's this meeting in London that's really good, and there's a lot of strong women there, and I suggest you go. And so I went, and those people in that meeting saved my life a second time, because I was sitting there in a meal after, and I was ranting about something, and this girl said, if you hate it that much, change it. And I'm like, all of a sudden, my first sponsor came back in my head, and it was like, you're responsible for your recovery, you're responsible for your recovery, you're responsible for your recovery. And I started putting more effort in. Then things were going to change at work again. And what happened with going to that meeting was I was going down every 3 weeks because it was a Monday off. And through that, I got the privilege of being able to go into Holloway and secretary a meeting in there every 3 weeks. And I was starting to get back on the boat. I was starting to connect with people. I was talking to people again. I was actually saying what was wrong with me. I was getting a little bit vulnerable. But it took a long time for this to work. And then a couple of years ago, work was changing again, and we'd have had to have gone Monday to Friday. And for the first time for many, many years, I made a decision that wasn't based on my insecurity of not having enough money. And I said, I can't do this. I've got family commitments now. I'll go into Holloway. I'm not trashing my recovery again to do things when I'm too tired. And it was kind of all step 3 stuff, you know. It was like, just take the leap, because I added up the money and it wouldn't have been enough to live on. But somehow it worked, you know. Somehow it worked because I made the decision, and that's what I did. And it just felt really freeing to have actually made a decision based on putting my recovery first, which, you know, she always used to tell me. I then started to get open enough to tell people that I needed a sponsor. I don't know how you found it, Paul, but I found it quite difficult because the women I did know really were friends, and the others I was kind of too scared to ask. And I heard a couple of people share, and I thought, I want you, and they couldn't do it. And eventually, I plucked up the courage to ask somebody I knew from quite a while away, possibly for all the wrong reasons, because I thought, well, if I've got to drive up to Mansfield and drive back to see her, it'll take away this fear of driving I've got. And it's working. You know, I'm back in meetings, I'm getting out and about again, I'm doing service where I can. I'm actually talking to people these days. And it's all that learning to be vulnerable again. You know, it talks in text about when we lose that ability to play and laugh. We forgot how to do these things. I'd forgotten how to do recovery. And it's kind of like being in active addiction. I didn't realise how far into that mess I'd got until I'd started to come out of it. And I hope that doesn't sound too depressing for anybody who's new about, because believe me, it's this fellowship has saved my life more than once. You know, it saved my life more than once, and yeah, I am just so pleased for it. And it's I can still get kind of quite flippant about it, because I started going to, you know, when I started saying to people, I'm looking for a sponsor, I'm feeling vulnerable, I need some help with this. Hang on, things just got better. Things just got better from doing that. You know, I was really scared. It's quite funny, things got scared. I got all quite nervous with my new sponsor, you know, but I don't feel I'll ever know you as well as I knew my last one. And she sort of said, well, what do you think step 4's then for that? Oh, yeah, I've forgotten about that. But remembering this stuff has brought me back, and there's something that's on the tip of my tongue, and I've really forgotten what it is. Yeah, getting vulnerable has reminded me that I'm responsible for my recovery. This fellowship has been there for me, and yeah, it's been there for me, and it will be there for you. People have carried me through those rubbish times, even though they didn't know it. And one of the things that I was doing, this was it, one of the things I was doing with my new sponsor when I was looking at my step 1, talking about how my disease had been active recently, she sort of looked at me and she said, where is this self-doubt? Where is this self-loathing coming from? And I really didn't know, but I was talking to a woman, and I kept, like the gambling I mentioned, I kept that in, and I kept that a secret for a very, very long time. And I was at a place with somebody, and they were talking about somebody playing online slots on a mobile phone, and I went, oh, poor man. And in that moment, I was actually giving myself a bit of compassion and not beating myself up for that secret that I'd kept. And you've taught me how to do that by giving me compassion. And just stay. You know, this place is wonderful. I'm going to be quiet. Thank you. I lost it there.